I often get asked what books I recommend to people who want to hone their scientific and medical writing skills. So in this video, I'm going to share my top 5 recommendations on books that can help you to refine your scientific and medical writing. And if we haven't met, hello, my name is Crystal Heron. I'm a trained biomedical scientist turned clinical researcher and now scientific and medical editor. And since 2011, I've helped scientists, clinicians, and medical communicators write with intention, clarity, and confidence. So there are so many books out there that cover different topics, from the writing process to the fundamentals of English to how to write certain types of documents to the nuances of scientific and medical writing and more. For this video, I will focus on books that are specific to scientific and medical communications. And these books are books that I've recommended for years. And in case you're interested, I've added links to all of the books in the description box. So let's start with the more obvious ones, which are style manuals. So the first book that I recommend is the AMA Manual of Style. This is not exactly light reading, as you can see. It is quite a substantial book, but it is comprehensive. And it's also available online, which is searchable, which is so helpful. And I used the online version for years, and I still primarily use that, but I actually won this book at a conference last year and lugged it home in my suitcase because I was so excited to have the hard copy. But this is my most used resource, and it's written specifically for medical communicators. And I turn to this book no matter what I'm working on. And so actually, if you are a researcher and you're not sure about working with an editor, this giant book is reason enough, because this is a lot to know. It covers everything from content to structure to ethics to inclusive language to word choice. It covers everything. So highly recommend this book as a great resource. So another style manual that I recommend is the Publication Manual of the American Psychological Association. So this book is also pretty comprehensive, although not as comprehensive as the AMA manual. As you can tell, it's a much thinner book, but still quite comprehensive. And if something is not in this particular manual, then I will follow whatever is in the AMA manual. And so the APA style manual I see more often in social sciences and nursing, which I actually find a little bit surprising because it's the medical field and I would think that it would be AMA style, but nursing specific journals tend to use this particular manual. So the manual covers a lot of similar things as the AMA, but there are some nuanced differences, particularly in formatting and style. So I highly recommend checking out this book as well, especially if the journal follows this particular style. Now, if you do work in the sciences, particularly in the basic sciences, you might want to check out the CSE manual, or the Council of Science Editors manual. So this is a helpful resource, which I don't have a copy because I don't use it very often. I do have the online version though, and it's a really helpful resource. It's not as comprehensive as the APA and AMA manuals by far, but it still has some helpful nuances to know if you're writing in the basic sciences. So those are the go-to guides for scientific and medical writing. But if you are looking for other resources, I have a few other books that I highly recommend that really inspired how I write and how I now teach scientists, clinicians, and medical communicators to write. So the first of these is the Chicago Guide to Communicating Science by Scott L. Montgomery. And this book has great guidance on all the formats that you can communicate science, from research papers to reviews, proposals, graphics, presentations, theses. It also has chapters on translation and teaching and communicating to the public. And it even has some specific guidance for people who speak English as another language. Now, this book has more breadth than depth, so it's a great place to start. And I actually cover a lot more or share a lot more of my thoughts on this book in another video that I will add to in the description box. So you can definitely check that out if you want to know more about my thoughts on this particular book. So the other book that I highly, highly recommend is Writing Science in Plain English by Anne E. Green. I would say this is probably the number one book that I recommend because it changed the way that I think about scientific writing. And it is a very approachable book. You can see it's quite small, and the chapters are short, and the sections are also really short. And so you can learn in small stints, like micro-learning. And there's great exercises in the book as well. And more than anything else, this book discusses something that I am very passionate about, which is getting away from traditional, complex academic writing and using plain English for expert readers. And I covered more of my thoughts on this particular book in another video, and I'll add a link to that in the description box. But if you only get one book, highly recommend this one. And this is actually the first edition. Her second edition came out last year, which will be arriving shortly so that I have that updated version as well. So the other book that I recommend is Writing Science by Joshua Samel. Pardon me, it might be Shamel. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. So this book actually is a great book to read after you read the Green Book because it's more comprehensive but has a lot of the same principles. And this book is laid out to follow a great process for writing and editing, which is you should start with the story and then the structure and then narrow down to paragraphs, sentences, and words. And this book really challenged my thinking and helped to inspire a lot of my own ideas on writing. Now, this book says that it's more about papers and proposals, but the principles that are in most of the book apply to anything that you write, as with anything in any of the books that I've mentioned already. So I particularly like the chapter on flow in this book. It's one of the biggest problems that I see in scientific and medical writing. And this is a really great book, and I'll actually cover this book in more detail in a future video. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss that. So those are the 5 books that I recommend to anyone who wants to hone their scientific and medical writing skills. They have helped me immensely. And I'd love to know what books you'd recommend to people who want to hone their writing skills. I hope that you'll add them to the comments so that we can all help each other become better writers. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you in the next video.